Welcome to the NZ Everyday Investor. My name is Darcy Unargo, and today in the studio, Andrew Malcolm from Mortgage HQ, co-founder of Mortgage HQ. You're a self-titled, world-famous financial author as well. How you doing, Andrew?
Self-titled, I think you lumped that on me. I'm going good, man. I love talking to a fellow advisor that I admire, that's doing the good job.
Good on you. I appreciate that. Well, hopefully this will be really enlightening and helpful to our audience. I just want to really unpackage a few things, mainly around your book that you just released here, the Three Property Formula, 3PF. You've given me this book, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you one of these mugs that says "I love Darcy," just to show my love for you. Thanks for that book. I've been gobbling it up as much as I can over the last probably 2 weeks ago or so, since I invited you on the podcast as a ploy to get a free book from you. And I've genuinely found it really, really good. What, like, just to kick it off, what inspired you, or what was the impetus behind why you decided to get this book done?
Yeah, we're coming up to our 7th birthday, and content-led strategy has been what our business has been about probably for about 5 years. And we've found that trying to educate people is very rewarding. It's a good way to get business, and that what we've been doing in the last couple of years is doing a lot of webinars, a lot of like our YouTube has quite a big following. What we also found was we weren't really addressing people that consume content in the written way. So I launched this 21 days free property investor course about 18 months ago, and it's just 21 emails day after day after day, and we had about 7,000 people sign up for that real quick and go through it, and a lot of people read most of the emails. So we found that people wanted to learn, they didn't mind reading. So I took our 21 days emails that cover quite a wide range of topics around property and mortgages. Then I took our webinars that cover different, we call it the mortgage life cycle, and I turn it into a book with case studies that, it's over 50,000 words, and I'm quite surprised at how easily it all flowed out because we're so passionate about it. There's so many case studies. It's a proven method that we're using ourselves, that our clients are using it. It wasn't really that hard to write. And so that's why I did it. I've tried to make it as evergreen as I possibly can so that if you pick this book up in 5 or 10 years, that it still holds. So I've printed some copies to get out there to clients, and just I wrote the book last year. I'm going to see how it holds this year, and then release it next year, given that we have gone from a very hot market to a cooling market. And I think that what I'm starting to feel now is the strategies in the book, although rather simple, they help decide on that pathway of growing the property portfolio. Why did I write it? Because I'm passionate about helping people reach their financial goals.
Yeah, that's easy. That's good. And that certainly helps when you're passionate about the topic that you're talking about, right? And if you remove all the financial benefits and all of the vocational aspects of this, what it does for your psyche, still, if you're passionate about it, you can't help talking about it. But what I like about the format or the tone of it is that I've read a few books, often, especially in personal finance, there's a certain degree of academia or theoretical or idealism injected into it, and it's sound, absolutely sound, but you can kind of tell from the tone of the author who's writing it that perhaps they're not actually in it enough.
Yeah.
They're on top of it but not in it, and that's what came out from this, is that, hey, you're actually able to pull something real and tangible and something that the everyday person can implement because it's written from the perspective of someone who's gone through it. So how important was it to actually go through a lot of these elements, to actually put these ideas out there, get some feedback from people, then
Yeah.
see how advisors work in that space before you actually put it into print? How important was that process?
Well, no disrespect, but we don't really care what other advisors say because we've got lots of clients that have proven and told us that these methods work, and it's not like it's a private IP. The way that we're trying to work is just around the mortgage rules to make sure that you can keep borrowing if that's what you want to do, if you want to build a bigger portfolio.
Hmm.
So the things that we care about is that our clients are executing on the strategies that we're promoting, and we're not over promising and under delivering, which is a pretty common thing in marketing these days. Look, the thing with when I was at university, I remember my entrepreneurship lecturer opened the first lecture by saying he'd had 4 failed businesses and now he's a lecturer. I didn't ever want to be like that. Bless the guy. He finally admitted that no, he wasn't a business guy. He was a teacher. I think first things first, I'm an investor, and I just so happen to own a financial advisory firm that helps people with properties, and it helps me become a better investor to teach other people concepts that make them better investors. So I was happy to do this as a selfish project because I feel like it has helped simplify the methods in my own mind on achieving success, certainly in the property game.
I call that intellectual lactation. You're you're absorbing knowledge, you're then giving it out, and as people demand it from you, it's easier to absorb it. So I totally understand what you're saying. As you teach others to do it while you yourself are doing it, there's this
Mm,
really powerful reinforcement that seems to happen. Real amazing virtuous cycle. I want to show you this little graph, because this is like the very first thing that slapped me in the face when I started reading the book. You talk a little bit about the Dunning-Kruger effect,
yeah.
and I'll link to this in the show notes for those that are listening to the audio only. But I want to ask you just how important it is to get to the peak of Mount Stupid and off of it as fast as you can. Actually, before that, do you want to just at a bird's eye level explain what the Dunning-Kruger effect is for our audience? You might have to
Yeah.
find it in the book as well.
The Dunning-Kruger effect is the less someone knows about something, the more confident they are that they know everything about it. And basically, it's just letting ego get in the way of you making good decisions if you think you already know. And what we've found over the years after talking to thousands of people about their mortgages is the people that you can't help are the ones that think they already know. And they might not actually be that successful. They might actually not be reaching their financial goals. But if they're sure that they know more than you, that it's very hard to help people. We all do this in some respects, whether it's with our own health, our own skill set about certain things. There's always more to learn. And if you've got that mindset of that, maybe actually I don't realize how much I don't know, overconfidence can be like the most dangerous thing for investing or for anything really. It's hard to explain how dangerous it is to be overconfident, especially when it comes to mortgages and property, because you can, as an investor, really what you don't want to do is destroy your money. And we've been very lucky, certainly over the last 20 years, where property prices have more than tripled. And there's a lot of people that might feel like they're actually very good at what they do, owning property. But a lot of this growth has happened because of the market, not because of your brilliance. And so once you realize how much is skill versus how much is luck, then you can start to be humble and start to explore the other opportunities, the other knowledge that is out there. And not everyone can do it. Not everyone can freely admit their lack of knowledge in a topic. How much do you know about, like, astrology, for example, the planets and the galaxies and the universe? If you ask a child who's just been taught about that the 9 planets and the sun and the stars, they might actually think that they know like an 8 out of 10 everything there is to know. But then when you get a little bit older and you start to realize that our little Milky Way is just a tiny, tiny, tiny speck of what is out there in the universe, you start to realize that what you know is not an 8 out of 10 of knowledge. It's not even a 1. And so
Yeah.
the maturity and the exposure to new information helps you see just how, where you actually lack confidence. And it's the same with property investing, it's the same with mortgages, same with investing in shares. If you're super confident, you got to check yourself, because maybe you're actually confident without competence, and that's just your ego getting in the way.
Wow. It's really interesting. Like from an advisor's perspective, quite often we'd like to think we've gone through and past the peak of Mount Stupid already. We'd like to hope, right? And then we're somewhere in between the valley of despair where you've just realized how much you really don't know about what you don't know. And
Mm.
then you're in between the valley of despair and the plateau of sustainability. You're somewhere in that enlightenment phase, and you're trying to pull people off of the peak of Mount Stupid whilst simultaneously trying to get more enlightenment yourself and become more confident in what you're doing. So, do you kind of find that, like, working in the advice industry, it's even more obvious that we don't know what we don't know yet, and we're going through this process?
Yeah, you just got to get exposed to information that's new, that is it's highly relevant and technical, to help you see that there's a lot more to learn. I'm very lucky that my business partner Blandon, he has a lot more knowledge in the property and mortgage game than I do, and my role is a simplifier. It is a contextualizer for our audience. And I'm lucky that Blandon is, black belt and I'm still, blue belt or purple belt or whatever just comes after white belt, because I'm not trying to be the black belt of property investing. I'm trying to stay close to someone who I know is going to get there a lot faster than I will. And I'm going to learn the lessons from him and to follow along and copy and learn from the mistakes. So if you think you're a black belt in something, you're truly going to have to find someone that is a black belt, expose yourself to what they are talking about, and help you realize that maybe you're not quite there yet.
Yeah. Oh man, I know how you feel. And it's hard though, right? Like thinking that you know a lot because you're part of a Facebook group or on Reddit or whatever, and you've got it all figured out. And it's hard to actually talk to somebody else who has the title of mortgage advisor, let's say, as an example, to arrange your mortgage when you're pretty sure you've got it all figured out, because it doesn't actually sound that complicated and people are really helpful out there in the community. So, like on that advice piece, do you find that often when people come to you guys to get financial advice around mortgages and property and getting a strategy together, there is this period of time where they have to kind of be broken in a sense, where they have to let go of some of those things that they thought they knew, or almost kind of allow themselves, like there must be an opening up process that they go through where they kind of dismantle their preconceived notions, right?
Yeah, and we try to use spreadsheets and logical explanations to help people realize the gaps in their knowledge, and that if they do see spreadsheets about borrowing power, about repayments, about refinancing or restructuring, about yields. Now, most people can't hold all of those formulas in their head. They can't do those numbers on their own. When they start seeing a lot of things that they haven't been exposed to before, there's a humbleness that hits these people to say, okay, even though I've got three properties, I'm not running my own spreadsheets. Or if I am running spreadsheets, they're not accurate. I can see that now. That helps set the tone for them to say, what more can I learn?
Hmm.
And then from there, there's enough trust to say, hey, have you considered these strategies? And the people that we haven't been successful in helping are people that they can't understand the logic or the rationality, or they don't have that longer term mindset. There's something holding them back on the trust side. So that's why we spend so much time on giving away information for free to try and help build up that trust, so that when people do come to us, there's less resistance. So even when we say something that they disagree with at a first level, that they will still consider it as being a strong option, even if they're not first convinced, that they will say, okay, explain that to me in more detail. Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
Oh yeah, totally. Like trust is so important when it comes to learning, right? So I totally get that. Going back to the book, the 3PF, three property formula, just
Yeah.
so that we don't forget to say, hey, what is it? That seems like the most obvious question I probably should have asked you at the start. What is the three property formula, Andrew Malcolm? Tell us the answer to that question firstly.
Look, the three property formula is a mindset for reaching passive income to a point where if you don't want to work, you don't have to. And for most New Zealanders, especially those that don't own their own business, the only real obvious way that people can reach financial freedom when they have regular income, like income for life basically, is through property investment. They might get lucky with a bit of crypto, they might do really well in shares over time, but most people don't have access to large chunks of some like chunks of cash that they can allocate into those types of investments. So property provides a way to get leverage, basically. So leveraged returns, because the banks don't like to lend money on businesses or shares in New Zealand. So if you can buy three properties, pay down the debt through rental income over a 15 to 30-year time frame, you can create surplus income that subsidizes what you want to spend your life doing. No, not everyone wants to work forever, whether you want to stop working at 40 or 50 or 70. Whenever you do, and even before you stop, it's nice to have the extra income. So the three property formula is a mindset for creating wealth for yourself, and it's a framework that simplifies how to do it, through intelligent property investing. You can do the other investing if you want, but this is my explanation on how to help 80% of people that are committed to reaching financial freedom. If they follow this framework, then they're giving themselves very high chance of success.
Not a guarantee, but getting a very high chance of success. And again, it's a real simple device just to compress the idea, three property formula. implies, hey, we can make it as complicated as we want, and we don't have to drink the Kool-Aid fully here. But if you do decide to go down this path, it's really nice to know there's a clear sort of structure around it. So I want to just pick on a few of the things that I've pulled out of the book so far and just run it past you. The first thing here, well, we've already talked about the first thing, that's the Dunning-Kruger effect. But the second thing, I guess, is the compounding returns. You mentioned an example really early on in the book where $1 million turns into I won't even say it, a ridiculous amount of money over a 20-year period, assuming a 30% compound. Now, obviously, that's very, very massive, right? Like getting a 30% compounding return over 20 years on $1 million. If you can maintain that, like, well done. So it is slightly theoretical. However, it is technically possible. And it's because of what you just said before, this magical word called leverage. Do you want to talk me through that though? Like how does that work? And is it really that easy just to grow wealth with property by applying a little bit of leverage?
Compounding returns is probably the single greatest formula to understand when you're investing, and it only really works if you reinvest the surplus. So if you've got an investment that makes you $10,000 a year and you roll that surplus into next year's investing and you continue to do that, then you can create massive wealth. What a lot of people do is they spend the 10,000 or they spend 8,000 of the 10,000 and only reinvest a little bit. And obviously there's life happens, but what compounding returns allows you to do is reach a really, really big number. And maybe that for you is $100,000 of income for life through property investment if you're disciplined for 20 years. And by disciplined, I mean your investing is it's like one of the first things on your budget. If you put investing as the first thing on your budget rather than the last thing, then you're going to get compounding returns that create wealth. If you put it last, then it's quite likely you're not going to reach that goal because you're only compounding a small number. And compounding, if you look at Warren Buffett, that's the famous compounding example. Now, he only became a billionaire, I think, when he was like 50 or even 60, maybe even 65. And then, like 80% of his net worth, or maybe even 95% of his net worth, it's some ridiculous number, is from after he turned 65. And it's just because of compounding. And when you're doubling big numbers in 10 years, you're going to become very, very wealthy. And I think that what is often missed, why some people have a big advantage over others, is the savings rate. So if somebody's earning a couple, they're earning 100 grand a year and their cost of living is 90 grand a year, then they're saving 10 grand a year, right? But if a couple is earning 120 grand a year and they're spending 90 grand a year, then they got 30 grand of surplus. And that, even though it's only a 20 grand difference in the first calculation, that savings rate allows them to compound to get to like just a ginormous difference over 20 years. And that's why it's so important to focus on your savings rate and your income. If you can get a $5,000 pay rise every year or every second year, more than just what you would normally, if it increases your savings rate by 50%, it's going to make a massive difference in your investing.
And I guess like there's a lot of stuff in that, right? Like what you just said. And there's a lot of psychology that people probably bring to the table with or without realizing it. But one of the things about passive income, I always use air quotes when I say passive income because it's actually not that passive at all, is that often people when they learn about passive income, they actually want to get it right now. And they want to get it right now often because they don't really want to work in the day job too much yet. Passive income is awesome, but often it takes a long time to set up the passive income really well. That's what I've noticed. And that's coming from experience as well. It takes a long time to get there. And when you get there, it's awesome. However, you can't use it as a substitute for your income on the way to achieving it because you're sacrificing the raw material required to build it if you're trying to replace your income. So that's one of the sort of challenges that I often see. But then there's other challenges around just kind of understanding how compounding works. From your perspective, what have you noticed are some of the sort of challenges that people face when they're trying to get their head around how compounding can actually work for them?
I I try not to call property investing passive income. I call it income for life.
Nice.
So income for life is when you're finished working, you still got the income, and your life is not the end of it. It might be for your kids or your kids' kids. So the whole time that you're living, you've got income whether you're working or not. That's the framework that I use. The thing with property is you get in the leverage return. That's what it's all about. That if you've got $200,000 of equity or cash, you can get capital gains on $1 million of property. And because it's 5 times more than your cash amount, your total income, the rental income on that property can be a lot larger than it would be if you just put your 200 grand down. So this is where understanding all of the numbers and the moving parts on interest rates and insurance and subtracting your expenses away from the income to create the surplus, that's where I think a lot of people get scared of the maths and they get scared of the bigger number with the leverage. But it's actually probably a safer investment doing it with a bit of leverage because you're getting that higher cash on cash return. Don't want to get too technical, but the market has priced leverage into it. And when you don't get debt, when you're buying properties, you're actually not going to get the cash on cash return that you're probably having to pay for. So you got to find that balance of how much debt is appropriate. And certainly over the last couple of years, people probably have been over leveraging with non-bank lenders, and not everyone, but just on average. We see very intelligent, experienced investors been in the game a long time. They're probably only doing 30 to 50% leverage. Now, in the beginning, that's not enough. You're not going to you do have to take some calculated risks, but that 65 to 80% leverage, that as long as you're buying intelligently, that's going to make your cash on cash return much, much higher than it would be if you weren't leveraging or if you're not leveraging enough.
That's
That's
really
why the
well. Yeah.
spreadsheets are so important.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, yeah, as much as we hate them sometimes, right? So, paying off your mortgage as
You
fast as you
just
can.
as much as you hate them, eh?
As much as I hate them, that's for sure. All right, and that's a really good point, though. So, paying off your mortgage as fast as you can. You kind of alluded to this before, where hey, maybe 30 to 50% might be appropriate in terms of a leverage amount later on, but
Mm.
at the start, as long as you're exercising some intelligence and it's part of a strategy, maybe much higher rates of leverage is what you need to do. But quite often, even if it's just somebody with one mortgage on their own home, that's all they're ever going to do, but they're still investing elsewhere, maybe not property, but elsewhere. The general advice is still just pay off the mortgage as fast as you can. What's your thoughts on that advice for those that are still just starting out? They're just starting out their wealth journey and they're thinking, I need to pay off this mortgage before I take investing too seriously. What would you say to someone like that?
Yeah, when you own one property, you got two competing goals. Is if you do want to create income for life, is should you buy that second property or should you pay off your first mortgage? Well, you can do both. You can, in the first couple of years after you've bought your first property, focus on paying down your mortgage fast, build up your equity, up your savings rate to a point where you have built up the equity and the surplus, whether it's an offset or revolving credit, because of the gains in the market. Hopefully, there's been some, is you're
Mm.
able to re leverage again and reborrow against your equity to buy another property. So, where it does get frustrating as an advisor helping people who want to achieve financial freedom through owning multiple properties is when they get distracted or they have this anchor on them thinking that, hey, I should pay my mortgage off fast or faster and then later worry about another property. The thing is, if you want to own 3 or 4 properties, if you're not going to use the equity from your first property, then how are you going to own the rest of those properties? So you've got the right mindset of paying down debt instead of going to max out your credit cards and go on holidays and buy things you don't need. But you should be thinking as a portfolio approach of your debt levels rather than just on your family home. And if we simplify it, that a 5-year-old would understand is that you're playing the game of Monopoly and you want to win. If you just buy one house on one street, you're not going to win the game of Monopoly. You have to have multiple houses on multiple streets if you want to have a realistic chance. And it's a similar concept for your own property investing. You don't want to get to a point where you've almost paid off your property and then you're thinking, oh, okay, if I get my property paid off, then how am I going to have income for life? I'm not. I might not have to pay rent. But let's say you've fully paid off your own family home and now you're starting to save cash. We already talked about the best allocation for cash for most people is probably going to be property investment because otherwise you're going to have to buy shares, you're going to have to buy crypto, or you might buy a small business. There's no leverage. and those investments will carry their own risks unless you've got some special knowledge of the market or special talent that's going to create a lot of income for life, which most people don't. Buying another property makes a lot of sense. So we're saying don't wait until you've paid off your property. Just keep safely re-leveraging until you get to a portfolio that you're comfortable with. Then use the surpluses to pay off the mortgages on your family home first, and then whatever strategic investment to pay off first makes the most sense. It's a strategy that builds on other strategies we've seen work well in the market. You've it goes by all sorts of different names, but you might have seen where there's been a triangle type approach where you have two or three high leverage, high return properties, so yield based properties, for example, in Invercargill, that have high cash flow, but probably over time lower growth. And then after you buy two or three properties in Invercargill, then you buy a property, say in Birkenhead, for example, is like a higher capital growth area in Auckland, and then you repeat the process so that you're getting a balance between high return, high growth versus high yield. And that's similar approach that we take. There's two investors that I admire that I reference in the book is Graham Fowler that owns probably 80 plus properties at the moment, and he is very much a cash flow based investor. He doesn't think about capital gains as much in his investing, and he really
Mm,
focuses on the yield on the way in. And
totally.
he traditionally has used 20-year mortgages with P&I on all of his investments, even though it's not tax efficient. Now I'm sure he's changed his tune. No, he was leaving too much money on the table doing it that way. But he was buying in Hawke's Bay and like central middle North Island, and that worked really well for him. And then you compare him with Matthew Gilligan, property accountant in Auckland, owns well over 30 properties. His approach has been to focus on better locations. Now, they're both right, but what is going to work for you? Well, Matthew Gilligan's income is probably a lot higher than yours, than mine, and because he owns a big accounting firm, he's very established. So you can't just straight copy his approach because you're only about to buy one or two properties and then you'll be stuck. You have to assess your own income situation and your own strategy based on your age, your dependents, your income reliability, your certain skill sets. You have to find the strategy that's going to work for you based on your skills and your appetite for risk. So just buying a book and trying to copy that successful investor's strategy might not necessarily work. You have to have a more nuanced understanding. And this is what my 3PF book has been trying to help people is see different case studies with one framework to tie them all together and then to try and pick the strategy that is going to work for them.
That's awesome. And I really like how you reference those two individuals that are fairly well known in property investment circles, but they do have very different core philosophies. And I think it's like anything with investing, you find it everywhere. People find their tribe and they find their model. They get quite dogmatic about it without realizing that for some people, for certain seasons, that is absolutely all you want to do. But in other times, you need to take more of a bird's eye view and take more of a portfolio approach to how you structure things. But going back to the three property formula, you've kind of outlined a little bit of what I don't want to give too much of it away, but one of the things that you want to do is you want to get rid of debt fast, right? But here we're talking about not just putting faith in yourself to get rid of that debt as fast as you can through your after tax income, but we're putting faith in the market to do the heavy lifting for you. But then the other aspect of this that I wanted to kind of unravel here is that when people do say if they did follow the three property formula and that's all they ever did, and by the way, it actually is pretty much all that you need to do in some cases for more than enough. But once people start, do you find that there's a tendency for some to get a momentum that's really hard to shake? In other words, they get to their three properties and they realize just how simple it was. Their eyes are open and they just want to blitz it and go for it, even though they actually have no need to take the risk to build the wealth that will generate. Do you find that momentum can actually be a trap here?
I would say that if you said I only need to own three properties, and let's call it three investment properties and a family
Sure.
home, right? You, over the 5 or 10 year period that you own those properties, will come to a point where you bought low on your way in and you can sell high on the way out. And that if you said, look, I'm never going to own more than four properties, but I'm going to keep replacing the properties that I own with better properties or better cash on cash return or equity growth. So you might buy an investment property for $500,000. You've got a nice discount on the way in because you spotted something that other people didn't spot. So let's say it's worth 550, and you hold that property for a couple of years. Now it's worth 650, but you're able to sell it for 700. Now you've, through buying and selling that property, created 100 grand of equity that didn't really exist. You created it. And outside of bright line rules, you don't have to pay tax on that. So if you repeat that process enough times over a 20-year period, you're going to create a lot of equity as well as the cash surplus from the rental less the expenses. And it might be that when you get to a certain stage, you're able to spot development opportunities, or you're able to spot opportunities where you can add minor dwellings, or you can strip out an old kitchen, old bathroom, put a new one in, and you've added $100,000 of value over 8 months. And you think, "Oh, you know what? I can pay tax on this. I can take the win." And if you're making 50 grand after tax on a trade each year to the side of your property portfolio growth, that's not a bad gig. You don't have to say, I want to own 10 properties or I want to own 20 properties. That's really hard to do. It takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of income, it takes a lot of certain skills and appetite for risk. But if you said, look, I'll get to 3 properties, 2 investments, and my family home, and if I end up keeping another property through my trades, so be it. But then once I get to that stage, I'm going to trade and flip properties. I'm going to do renos. I'm going to learn about arbitrage. Investing is about good arbitrage. And if you don't know what that is, look it up. Arbitrage is spotting opportunities that other people don't yet recognize. And it might be that a house needs 100 grand reno, but you're able to get 80% of the benefit of that 100 grand reno with a 20 grand reno. And so you go to sell that property after you've done the reno and you make 50 grand of profit, and it only took 3 months. Is there risk? Yes, of course there's risk. Is there a plan B? Well, if you're able to, you just hold that property. I think that what is missed for your normal, I say mum and dad property investors, but we have a lot of same-sex couples and siblings and friends investing together as well, is property flips and trades. Once you have a base of assets and you're comfortable with the debt and the numbers, can be very, very lucrative, even when you have to pay tax. Should you do property flips and trades when you're just getting started? You've got to be careful because you don't yet understand the concepts and you don't understand the risks. But once you've been a property investor, owner in the market, learning about things for 5-10 years, it's a lower risk strategy than, say, 300 grand of crypto, in my opinion. Okay, so you just got to find the strategy that works for you, and paying down your debt faster is often going to be to the detriment of having more income for life later. Got to find what works for you and reverse engineer back, and that's what the book is about: is decide how much income for life you want, whether it's 20 grand or 200 grand, and reverse engineer how many properties you need to own, how much debt you need to have, how many flips or trades you need to do. Scope out your next 10-year plan, and find advisors and accountants and lawyers and agents that are going to be in your team, that achieving that has a much higher chance of success.
That's great. I think it kind of goes back to this, doesn't it? That the rate at which you're growing your portfolio needs to be in line almost with the Dunning-Kruger effect that we talked about at the start, because it's going to take you some time to learn the ropes. So talking about that property flipping strategy, I look at that as quite a high risk speculative sort of practice. And yeah, it's technically possible to scrape together some equity that you could then plow into something else. That's great, but it's also incredibly high risk. And it's like snakes and ladders, one step forward and you're right back at the starting line. So if you can kind of get off Mount Stupid as fast as you can, slow yourself down, figure it out. Like,
Mm.
it's still a great idea, but maybe it's better done when you've got a better knowledge base and more time, etc.
Yeah, I
But
mean, for
yeah, go
for
ahead.
property for property renovations, I'm not a handy guy. I wouldn't want to be trying to pick up the hammer, strip things out, or paint things, or what. This doesn't interest me. So if I'm going to do any major renovations or look at projects that have that, I'm always going to have somebody that is way more skilled and experienced in that space involved with skin in the game, so that
Mm.
if anything goes wrong, that they'll lose at least the same amount as me. If you're wanting to do certain projects but you haven't done them before, don't be afraid to leave money on the table to work with somebody that has done it before, that has got a lot of knowledge and skin in the game. Now, I've certainly done investments where I've given away half the profit to somebody that's doing a lot less of the work. To have them in the project, it increases the chance of success quite a bit more than the cost of giving away some of the profit.
Well, on that topic, though, and we'll come in for a landing here shortly. Just on the topic of leverage and leveraging off of others, especially that have a higher skill set in the area that you're embarking in. Tell us a little bit about the business, Andrew. So I know that you're not necessarily on the tools in the business, like you're not writing mortgages yourself, but you've got a team for you. Do you want to talk to us a little bit about the structure there?
Yeah, we've got 40 people in Half Moon Bay, East Auckland, coming up to our seventh birthday, and we've got a team of about 10 advisors that is supported by a lot of administrative, submissions, settlement, servicing support. And what we try to do is make it streamlined for our advisors and for our clients so that it doesn't necessarily matter if you get the same person again in a few years' time. So we're probably top five, I'm guessing, mortgage firm in the country just based on the volume that we're doing at the moment. And what we're really trying to do is to become the number one in people's mind for property investing along the mortgage side of things. So that we're passionate about. Pretty much everyone in our company owns property investment, and which is pretty funny because the average age is probably like around 20, 27, 28. So it is a young team, but we're very lucky to be exposed to a lot of investors and opportunities daily. So we've learned a lot about successful investing and and failure in investing through watching our clients or people that choose not to work with. Why do we do this? Is the passion around investing, and all of our team members are trying themselves to create the income for life so that they don't have to work for me probably. uh, it's definitely a passion project here.
Yeah. No, that's important. Now, turning our attention to the market. So you're operating a business, going through a growth phase. Everybody on the team is also doing the same thing. So it's like this huge, wonderful cult, I guess you could say, of wealth building, of people that with skin in the game and people that they're working for. We're in an environment which has changed significantly in probably about 12 months. It was about almost 12 months ago with the introduction of the triple CFA. I've talked extensively on the podcast about that. We've seen
Yeah.
interest rates more than double. We've seen some new tax laws and just a general vibe from a government who's not necessarily, or at least doesn't seem right now like they're on board with a lot of people trying to get wealthy from property. So the
Mhm.
whole vibe has kind of changed a little bit. Your thoughts, just in general, with the changing environment that we're in right now?
Yeah, it does. If properties go back to their average, would seem like property prices would drop over the next year or two, if more. So we're 1st of August 2022. In the last 2 or 3 years, property prices have shot up way above their average growth rate. So just reversion back to the mean does make sense. Having said that, high inflation does create a bit of a wedge to stop prices dropping too much. So in real terms, they might be less valuable, but the dollar figure that you see on valuations might not change that much. Timing the market, are we going to see a recession that's going to be 3 months or is it going to be 7 years? No one knows that. I think that investing on the fundamentals still holds true. And if you're trying to time the market, it's quite likely that you're not going to make an investment decision and that in 10 years' time, you won't be that much closer towards your financial goals if you just sit on your hands and do nothing. So, even more than ever before, understanding the numbers is extremely important because when interest rates 2.19, like they were, it's very easy to have a surplus and that to not worry about the surplus because the cost of the debt was so cheap. Now, you could borrow $1 million for $22,000 interest
Yeah,
only.
crazy, nuts.
And so, it was absolutely ludicrous if you didn't borrow $1 million if you could, if it was only going to cost you 22 grand a year. Now it's probably going to cost closer to triple that. And because you're not getting the interest rate, the interest deductions on the investments, until hopefully if government changes that might come back. Focusing on what we call the mortgage coverage is very, very important. And buying in areas that one of my business, one of the guys here, he just bought a property in Martin. Now I had to look that up. I was like, where is this? And from memory, it's like an hour out of, well,
Hmm.
not even that, out of Palmerston North.
Yeah.
And the return was, closer to 15%, and it's right next to a countdown. So is that a risk? Yeah, of course it's a risk. Is it riskier than buying in Birkenhead with 2% return? Like, I don't know the answer to that, but I know that one option allows you to keep buying more properties, and it's going to be highly likely it's going to be cash flow surplus forever.
Mm.
And the other, the Auckland based investment, unless it's got development potential and you've got it way undervalued, there's more risk. Because if it doesn't cash flow and you have a hit on your income, then that might cause pressure. And I think that on your own circumstances, you need to assess how stable is my income, how stable is my business, if it's a business, and is my income growing. If you're in a strong position that's getting stronger, then you can take those risks, and then you can protect yourself by getting the right insurances. But if you're getting closer to the end of your working life, or your business is on a bit of a downward cycle, or your income's not growing, certainly not in proportion to inflation, then you've got to be careful about riskier investments. And if you are going to invest, you really, really, really got to focus on the yield so that you don't have to keep topping up the investments. I just bought a property last year, and we're doing a renovation for 40,000, but we thought we are going to develop the property. Now we've put that plan on hold. So there's 40,000 of cost that we thought wasn't a high chance it was going to come. Now it's not a problem because we got the backup, we got the surplus. It would have been a problem if we weren't ready for that, and we might have had to sell the property at a loss. So you have to expect extra cost. That's why having the spreadsheets before you make investments is so important.
That's good. Okay. Well, we've probably have to wrap it up here. This has been a fantastic conversation, and I want to just again plug the book. I've only, for full disclosure, read a third of it. I'm still working through it, but again, what I've seen is amazing. How can people get a copy of this? If they want to get a copy of this, they have to be a client of Mortgage HQ. Presumably that
Oh,
helps, but is
yeah.
there another way that they can get a copy of this book?
Yeah, just mhq.co.nz. There'll be a bunch of links on our homepage. And if you're watching videos, then just jump on our YouTube Mortgage HQ and give us a follow, because we're definitely posting there a lot more often.
Absolutely. You guys are owning the whole YouTube space in terms of mortgage and property right now in New Zealand. So I'm sure a lot of our audience is possibly already familiar with your channel. It's definitely good. Like, it's really easy to fall into these little cultish kind of gatherings around models of building wealth.
Mm.
And even property is one of them. But inside of that, I know you well enough to know that there's some diversified thoughts. It's not like you just will use one strategy, whether it's yield or capital gains is a really simple example. You'll blend them together and acknowledge that everybody's different and different solutions for different people. So that's really cool. Well, we'll leave it there right now, but I'll give you one last opportunity. Any parting words of wisdom that you want to leave our opportunity, our audience with, Andrew?
Yeah, if you're gonna catch up with Darcy, give him a text. Make sure he's not late. You got breakfast next time.
That's a little bit of an inside joke, but yeah, we caught up last week for breakfast, and I think I was only 10 minutes late that time. But yeah,
6 minutes. That's all right.
oh, 6 minutes, not like anyone's watching or anything, right? Yeah, no, that's cool. All right, well, thank you again for your
Thanks,
time. Really
Darcy.
generous of you, Andrew, and we'll catch you next time.
Cheers, mate.
Good one.